Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because you want to get smart, fast. You want those aha moments, right?
Exactly, without getting totally swamped in data.
That's the plan. Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating area, the Mokro, Polje, and Bukovica regions. History, archaeology, the whole deal.
It is fascinating.
Mhm.
And, our editor was genuinely surprised putting this together. Just the sheer volume of stuff out there online about these places.
Totally. It felt like uncovering something, well, unexpected. Now, you should know this collection of sources, it wasn't exactly handpicked in the usual way.
No, the idea was just to grab everything mentioning Mokropolje or Bukovica, so it's broad.
Very broad. Think of it like a pile of clues. We're going to sift through them, pull out the interesting bits. But keep in mind, like the editor said, verifying every single detail would be a whole other project.
Right. So our mission today isn't about proving every fact beyond doubt. It's about exploring the stories these sources tell, understand the region's past, the people, based on what we've got here.
Okay, so framework. We've basically got four main chunks of material we're looking at. There's Niska Krajina Ushrenjem Vijeku, that's medieval stuff, archaeology focus.
Right. Then the Bajić family piece.
Yeah, Prelosio Paradici Bajić. More specific, looking at land and one family in Mokropolje.
And the other two.
Two untitled sections. One dives deep into folk life, customs in Bukovica. Super interesting.
The ethnology part.
Exactly. And the last one is a glossary. Local words, phrases, gives you a real flavor.
So archaeology, family history, folklore, language. It lets us see the region from lots of different angles, doesn't it?
It really does. Let's start at the beginning then, archaeology. What's the earliest stuff telling us?
Well, there seems to be evidence pointing to a Serbian presence around Nin, going back to at least the 7th century.
Yeah.
Yeah, and specifically, they mention walls built around ancestral burial mounds, Gromile, in a place called Uzdolje.
Walls around burial mounds, what does that suggest?
It suggests these weren't just casual burial spots. They were important. Ancestral connections, maybe rituals. Building walls means defining, protecting.
Yeah.
A real sense of place.
A lasting connection. Okay. Then things get shaken up.
Right. You get the Franks showing up in the 9th century, political shifts. Then by the 10th century, Croatians control Lika and Pliva.
And what about the Serbs then?
Well, the sources mention Serbian refugees, interestingly, finding shelter in Croatian areas, like near the Krupa River, suggesting they sought out their own people even amidst these changes.
Shows how fluid things were back then. Borders shifting, people moving.
Absolutely. Constant flux.
Yeah.
Then a bit later, Tin actually comes back under Serbian control, under King Tvrtko.
And does that leave traces?
It does. Very tangible ones. These things called Mimrorovi or Stechi, big medieval tombstones.
Stechi, right. I've heard of those.
And the key thing here, many found in places like Biskupija, Uzdolje, near the Cetina River.
Yeah.
They have Cyrillic inscriptions.
Cyrillic. So a direct link
to the Serbian Orthodox population. It's pretty strong evidence. Plus, they mention funeral feasts, trizni, associated with these graves. Common Slavic, later Serbian tradition.
So the takeaway is clear archaeological markers of a Serbian Orthodox community there centuries ago.
Exactly. And the spread of these tombstones suggests it wasn't a small group either. They were established.
What about their way of life? The sources touch on that.
Yeah, they're described as having a sort of military character,
Right.
maybe reflecting the times, turbulent.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And their economy was mainly based on livestock, pastoral,
Yeah.
which is a bit different from some other Slavic groups who were maybe more focused on farming earlier on.
But they did farm eventually.
Yes, it notes that settled agriculture and crafts actually developed relatively early too. So maybe a mix, adapting.
A mix of warrior ethos, pastoralism, and developing agriculture. It sounds like a society shaped by its environment and, well, pressure.
Precisely. That military aspect probably feeds into this whole Krajist idea, the borderland, which we'll get to.
Okay, any other interesting finds?
Well, there's pottery going way back, 6th, 5th centuries BC, shows long-term habitation.
Wow, okay.
And then later, Slavic earrings, karačis, found near Benkovac, Knin, including a specific type, the 3 hollow berry ones.
And that tells us?
It connects them to wider cultural networks. Those particular earrings are linked to the Kiev cultural sphere, so not totally isolated.
Interesting. Wider connections. We also heard about the Gromile, the mounds, and Trizni again.
Right, those burial mounds and feasts keep popping up. But there's also this more unusual mention, a theory about air burial.
Air burial, what's that?
Based on an old text, Predangio Prosinli Vremenima, It suggests some early Slavs might have, well, left the deceased exposed to the elements.
Ah, it's different.
It is. Shows the variety in early beliefs. The Gromile are obviously more common in the archaeological record, but it's a fascinating glimpse into other possibilities. The Trizny, though, the feasts, seem pretty consistent. Communal remembrance was key.
It wasn't all serious burial stuff, though, was it? There were parties.
Huh? Well, sort of. They mention pagan igricha, gathering places like between villages.
What happened there?
Social events, meeting people, maybe even finding a spouse, getting married right there. You can picture it, can't you?
Yeah, lively communal spots. Must have been important.
Definitely. And the names of these places sometimes stuck around in later records, showing their lasting significance.
Okay, zooming out a bit. The sources mention Constantine Porphyrogenitus, the Byzantine emperor. He listed early Serbian towns.
He did. Names like Destinik, Trnovac, Medaraje, Dresnik, maybe near the Una River that way, Lesnik, Kotor, Desnik. Gives you a sense of the geography of that early principality.
Even if we can't pinpoint every single one today.
Exactly. It's a snapshot from that era. Then we get the formation of the Kyrgyzstan.
The borderland. You mentioned pressure from the west.
Yeah, starting around the 9th century. This constant pressure, it forces defensive thinking, building fortifications.
Oh, kind.
Earth and wood ramparts in the flatter north, apparently, and stone forts, gradine in the hills. Practical responses to living on an edge.
So this Kyrgyzstan wasn't just a line on a map. It shaped how people lived, their identity even.
Absolutely. A distinct border culture, defense, resilience. It becomes part of who you are.
Right. Okay, let's jump forward. We get a specific mention of Radučić village. When's that?
1368. In a document about damages to the Nin diocese, caused by an official named Emmerich Laković.
And Radučić is involved how?
One of Laković's men involved in grabbing church land was named Tupanobilis de Radozic from Radučić.
Sumpa from Radučić, okay.
And there's even a little theory floated that maybe he's an ancestor of the later Trumpich family. A small detail, but it grounds the place in history, gives us a name.
Connects the dots. Does Radučić pop up again soon after?
Next mention seems to be 1437. Something about a Georgi filly, Stephanie Martinoshevich. But maybe more intriguing.
Go on.
Is this mention of a fortified town called Kudentin.
Kudentin, okay.
And it comes up in a really interesting context. Someone suggested St. Paul might have visited Radučić.
St. Paul, seriously?
Yeah. The implication being the area must have been on major routes, like Constantinople to Rome kind of major.
Wow, that changes the perspective. Not some isolated backwater.
Not at all. Makes a fortified town like Kuden seem logical if it's strategically important.
Okay, let's keep moving. The Ottomans arrive. Big changes coming.
Huge changes. We get a little snapshot from the early 16th century, a record mentioning the Avlanav Buk waterfall in Bobodol.
Just a geographical note.
Yeah, but it helps picture the landscape then. Anchors it a bit.
And in Radučić itself, there's a church.
Church of St. George. But its age is fuzzy. The sources aren't sure if it was there before Orthodox settlers arrived or built by them.
So it could have been an older church adapted?
Possibly. The architecture is simple lunette, bell arches typical of stuff built anywhere from the 13th to 16th centuries. Hard to pin down. Raises questions about religious transitions, you know?
Definitely. Now, the Ottomans relied on certain groups in the borderlands, right?
Yes, the Orthodox Vlachs feature prominently. They had military duties for the Ottomans.
But they got something in return.
Certain privileges, yeah. It was a common Ottoman practice in frontier zones. At the same time, you see Orthodox Serbs migrating from Bosnia into northern Dalmatia.
When was this?
Starts even before Bosnia fully falls to the Ottomans, mid-14th century onwards. People moving, maybe seeking refuge, maybe opportunity.
So Serbs were already present in Dalmatia quite early.
Seems so.
Yeah.
There's even a Venetian admiral, Peter Loredan, mentioning Serbian vassals near Obravac way back in 1423.
Before Venice even fully controlled Dalmatia.
Well, Venice acquired Dalmatia in 1409, so early in their rule. And that sets up this long conflict, Venice versus the Ottomans, right on this territory.
And this is where the Uskoci come in.
Exactly, the Uskoci. Refugees, fighters, basically resisting the Turks, often allied with Venice.
Famous names associated with them.
Oh, yeah. Families like Smiljanic, Jankovic, and legendary figures like Bukman Dušić. He's even in that famous poem, The Mountain Wreath. They were crucial for Venetian defense.
Tough fighters on the frontier. Did the Serbs also look elsewhere for help against the Ottomans?
They did. Later on, late 17th, 18th centuries, they supported Austria in wars, hoping for liberation.
And that led to?
Well, after a major defeat at Kačanik, it led to the Great Migration of Serbs in 1690, led by Patriarch Arseniy III Ardojević, moving into Habsburg lands for safety.
A massive upheaval.
Huge. Changed the whole map, really, demographically and religiously, for both empires.
And the Habsburgs welcomed them.
With conditions. Emperor Leopold, I granted them significant privileges, but in return for military service. It was strategic, bolster the border defenses.
And the Serbian church's role in this?
Crucial. They saw maintaining their church leadership as vital to keeping their faith and, really, their identity as a people alive in this new empire. Those privileges Leopold granted were key to establishing that.
Okay, back in Dalmatia under Venetian rule, what was happening in the late 17th century? More fighting.
Oh, yes. The sources talk about Morlac resistance in the mid-1680s. That term, Morlac, often meant Serbs in the hinterland.
Who was leading this?
Figures like Stojan Jankovic again, leading raids, helping Serbian families resettle on Venetian land.
Was that smooth sailing?
Not entirely. It partly caused food shortages. And you also see attempts by the Catholic Archbishop of Split to encourage Uniatism.
Uniatism, trying to get the Orthodox to join the Catholic Church.
Essentially, yes. Join Rome, but keep some of their Orthodox rights. It caused tension. People wanted to keep their distinct Orthodox identity.
Resistance seems like a recurring theme. Any major revolts against Venice itself?
There was one in the early 18th century, led by Peter Jagodic, mostly about heavy taxes.
How did that end?
Badly for him. He was imprisoned, treated brutally, apparently lost his sight and hearing, released eventually but broken, and wasn't allowed back home. A really harsh example of Venetian power.
Grim. So, if Austria wasn't the ultimate liberator, and Venice was sometimes oppressive, where did people look?
Increasingly towards Russia, the big Orthodox power.
The shared faith connection.
Exactly. The Serbian church really fostered those ties. Appeals went straight to the czars for help. It even led to some Serbs migrating to Russia in the mid-18th century.
Migrating to Russia?
Yeah, they established a whole region called Nova Serbia, New Serbia, though it had its own problems establishing a new church structure there.
So people were leaving Dalmatia too. Why?
Still the same pressures often. Heavy taxes, that pressure to convert. The resistance to Uniatism was strong. You hear about figures like Pilipenda who absolutely refused.
Pilipenda, just a name representing that steadfastness.
Seems like it, yeah. An example of refusing to give up the Orthodox faith. Plus, sometimes Austrian authorities actually encouraged Serbs to leave Dalmatia and settle in Austrian lands. Figures like Bishop Vicentice Timijevac were involved.
A complex mix of push and pull factors driving emigration.
Definitely. Though Venice sometimes did acknowledge Serbian contributions, Stojan Jankovic actually got a knighthood from them.
So, a complicated relationship. Recognition one minute, repression the next.
Seems that way. There was another rebellion later, the Kruja Rebellion, again over taxes, also brutally put down.
Right. Shifting into the 19th century now, any prominent figures emerge from this region?
Yes, the sources highlight a few important names in Serbian cultural and national life. Nikodim Miloš, a major canon lawyer, historian.
Okay.
Mirko Korleja, a writer, and Onisim Popović, described as a patriot who ran afoul of the Austro-Hungarian authorities later on.
So a continued intellectual and cultural vitality even with all the pressures?
Absolutely. These figures were key in preserving heritage and consciousness during big political changes.
Okay, let's completely change gears now. Let's talk folk life. Customs, beliefs in Bukovica. This sounds fascinating.
It really is a glimpse into, the everyday texture of life. They talk about Svetkovanja celebrations, both domestic and public.
Like what?
The Kriznika, the family's patron saint day, was huge. Really central to family and community identity.
Ties into that strong Orthodox identity we've seen. What about beliefs about the world itself?
Yeah, folk explanations for how things work, like the power of the sun. There's one belief mentioned: if you get sunstroke, smelling sweat from under your own armpit could help.
Seriously? What's the logic?
The idea seems to be strength repels strength. Your body's own strength fights off the sun's strength. It's folk logic, right?
Okay. Fascinating window into how people made sense of things. Did they believe in mythical creatures?
Oh, absolutely. A whole cast. The Vukovic werewolf.
Classic.
Then there's Meljak or Macic, some kind of demon. And Orko sounds like an ogre. And the nightmare spirit.
Sounds like a lively unseen world. Any special powers?
The Vukovic apparently could shapeshift. Turn into a donkey, white horse, black ox, dog, even a cat. Adds a layer of uncertainty, doesn't it?
Mm.
Things aren't always what they seem.
Definitely keeps you on your toes. What about magic for good things like healing?
Yes, folk magic and basmi incantations.
Yeah.
Used for healing, protection. There's a story told about a woman, Stefanija Pelasheva.
What'd she do?
She used a specific basma for breast pain. It invoked St. Peter and St. Paul, and even involved, like, symbolically chipping a piece of marble.
Wow. So blending folk practice with religious figure.
Very common. Using the power of words, ritual, saints, for everyday problems.
Were there fun things too? Games.
Yep. They mention a traditional game called Krivanje. Sounds energetic. People crawling on the ground trying to hit a wooden target with a big stick.
It sounds like potential for chaos. Good fun, though.
Keeps things lively. And of course, lots of customs tied to religious holidays.
Oh, Christmas.
Christmas with the Bad Jack, the Yule log, St. John's Day, SV Ivan's Jack with bonfires.
Yeah.
Also days like St. Procopius, Ugina Maria, Mala Gospodzina.
Each with its own traditions.
And superstitions, like don't start new work on a Friday, it's bad luck. Things like that woven into the rhythm of the year.
And finally, a quick mention of clothing and weapons.
Yeah, traditional clothes and this custom. Young men looking to get married were expected to carry weapons.
Really says something about the times and maybe ideas about masculinity, readiness.
Exactly. Social norms reflected right there.
Now, to get really specific, there's this glossary, Raduczko Mokropolski glossary, local words.
Ah, yeah, this is great. Gives you the real local flavor.
Like Balatura, apparently an opening in a stone wall for sheep, specifically in Kutlachi.
Practical stuff.
Badava means in vain or free. Bichan, a light-haired child or person.
Nice descriptive words.
Glasha, an affectionate word for head. Kolabura, another word for that sheep opening. Vavje means always.
Veshe. I like.
Brekurnese, traditional peasant shoes, maybe made of rubber now. And Udelica, a small bowl or cup.
That's like a linguistic time capsule, isn't it? Connecting you right to their daily lives.
It really is. Okay, last section we identified, the Bajić family.
Right, focusing in on one family in Mokro Polje, using land records, the cadastre.
We learned about their family home, Dvor Bajića, probably built around 1820.
Gives a time frame, a specific location.
And it mentions a local gathering, the Mokropolski Susret, and includes a poem.
Yeah, by Nataša Bajić. Apparently quite reflective about ancestors, the land. Mentions olive trees as symbols.
That sounds lovely. A personal touch connecting past and present.
It's a good way to bring it down to a human level, that family history lens.
So wrapping this deep dive up, wow, we've covered a lot. History, archaeology, folk traditions, language, family stories, all from Mokro Polje and Bukovica.
What really comes through is just how long and, well, dynamic the history of this place is. Constant movement, conflict, cultural mixing, but also deep roots.
And like we said at the start, it's kind of amazing how much richness came out of this pile of internet sources.
It really is. It underlines how much history is layered into places you might not immediately think of as, major historical centers.
It definitely makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other places have these complex, fascinating stories hidden just beneath the surface? Maybe this has sparked something for you listening in, thinking about how these local stories fit into the bigger picture of identity, of heritage. Maybe it's even got you curious about the hidden histories closer to your home.
Something to think about.
Definitely. The exploration, as always, continues.